You're listening to Business Success in a Virtual World podcast. If you are a leader navigating these new immersive technologies, this is your definitive resource to understand the innovative power of XR, VR, and AR. I'm Tim Beharon, Chairman of Creative Strategies, and I'm joined by Barton, President of ISM Guide. In each episode, we navigate through new products, effective strategies, and highlight actual business case studies implementing extended reality into business processes. Our resource website now boasts over 300 case studies, 300 articles, and 100 videos presenting successful examples of businesses using these technology in field service, training, digital twins, customer service, in medical and manufacturing, and so much more. Check out the website at ismguide.com. Now, on to the next episode. This week's podcast will be a bit different in that we're not going to deal with case studies as usual, as much as talk about what happened at Augmented World Expo, the big spatial computing exposition that took place in Long Beach from June 18th through 20. Barton and I were very privileged to be able to speak there on various topics and panels, and I had a main panel on the main stage dealing with the future of XR headsets that I'll talk about in a minute. But it was an incredibly important show. In years past, it was in San Jose or in Santa Clara, California at the Santa Clara Convention Center. But this year they moved it down to Long Beach because it allowed them to bring in more people and bigger space for exhibits. It was a good show. It covered a lot of areas, and there were almost 150 sessions, 500 speakers. And it was, for us anyway, besides speaking, it was a great show to go and see what was new and hot in the world of spatial computing, XR, MR, and AR. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit, first of all. In my part of the session, which I'll kick off, I did a session with three very key people from companies that are on the leading edge of dealing with XR headsets. One was Qualcomm, where I had Saeed Bakadar, Senior Director of Product Management of Qualcomm, and then Jacek McGugan, Head of Commercial Virtual Reality at Lenovo, and Anna Nilsson, Head of Design and Research at Varjo. These are the folks that are actually going to be driving things going on at the hardware level. And my session was entitled The Future of XR Headsets and How They'll Deliver Our Spatial Future. The panel delved into both the technical advancements that are coming, and this is where Qualcomm's role plays an important part of building the component layer, the technology layer, to deliver the next generation of spatial computing. And they came away from this particular session with at least three key points that they all agreed on. That they believe that XR's most prominent impact will be in the enterprise for at least the next 2 to 3 years. They believe and are telling us about major developments of companies that they're working with to deliver XR headsets now for everything from training, field service, etc. And that's an important thing to keep in mind, that headsets today, whether they be from Apple's Vision Pro to even some of the Meta stuff that's going on, they are being repurposed and focused specifically on marketing campaigns to the enterprise, not just consumers. And to be honest with you, most of the uptake we're seeing for Apple is in business. The consumer side is more on what we call early adopters. The second thing that they pointed out is that the headset's future, XR headset's future, is going to be mixed reality. It's not going to be necessarily dedicated XR or VR headsets as we had for the last 5-10 years. It's going to expand to be including, multiple levels of capabilities that include mixed reality and to some degree AR capabilities. The third one was when I asked about Apple's Vision Pro and its competitive position, all of the players pointed out that Apple's Vision Pro entry and Apple's entry in general is a very important move for the industry. It's kind of, it floats all boats. They believe Apple taking a position with Vision Pro and showing what, in essence, is the art of the possible is a big thing for educating the entire world about XR headsets. And even though today that they're focused a bit more on the enterprise, the evolution of the XR headsets, moving towards mixed reality and then eventually to AR headsets, is really going to be the thing that is going to drive what we call, or Apple calls spatial computing, into not only business, but into the masses. There were a few products I saw there that I wanted to also highlight. One was a product called the Spacetop laptop from Sightful AI. This is a unique way of approaching a new laptop. Basically, it's a laptop with no screen. Instead, the screen is in a set of AR glasses. So when you buy a Spacetop laptop for $19.99, you're given the computer and the CPU and all of the technology to make it run using their own OS that uses Web XR and allows you to take the glasses and put them on and create multiple screens instead of just one. As you know, with any laptop today, you're just looking at a single screen. But with the Spacetop, it's giving you kind of a mixed reality approach. So you could have 2 screens, 3 screens, 5 screens, and you're entering it through web apps because it's not quote unquote Windows compatible. But in this particular case, all of Microsoft's apps are already web apps. So pretty much every app that you could use that has been created in the web can run on this product. Another product that I got to see was the Haptics new GI gloves. These are very interesting. I actually met with them the day before the event in a suite to see how these gloves worked. And they basically are gloves that fit on your hand that have all of the electronics on it that allows you to have realistic touch for training, robotics, and other digital environment. I'll ask Barton to just respond to this because he actually got to play with them. I had a time problem where I didn't get a chance to actually use them, but Barton did. Barton, what was your reaction?
So it's one of the points I wanted to make as well, Tim. You know, haptics has come a very long way. And I want everybody that is following our podcast to really begin to put some focus on this. As Tim already alluded to, it's the ability to extend touch and feel through your hands using what are haptic gloves. And what it allows you to do, and what the demo allowed you to do, is to literally pick up objects that were in an immersive environment and move them somewhere. I remember I picked up a starfish and put it in the sea. I looked at an anchor that had rust on it. I ran my fingers along the rust of the anchor and I could feel the bumps of the rust. They had different objects, for example, different types of animals from the sea that are a little bit dangerous to hold. You'd hold them, you could feel the prickling in your fingers of the spines of the fish. And so this is kind of like fun what we saw, but think about the next step. And I'll talk about it a little bit in a while. But IKEA will now use these types of haptic capabilities so that you can feel the fabric that you're going to put on one of their sofas. So I think we're not quite there yet, Tim, but the movement over the last 2 years for haptics is tremendous. And the ones that they showed is being used by nuclear scientists to touch materials that they really don't want to touch, in human hands. But the haptic runway is tremendously long.
Yeah, and the company is Haptech X. And their booth, by the way, was always crammed with people wanting to get in and do a demo. The last thing I want to bring up is Meta was there this year in a very different perspective. In years past, they had a huge booth that focused on more specifically Meta Quest and its use for a very broad market. They were looking at it in the context of especially for consumers. This year, they had a smaller booth, but it was very targeted. It was Meta for business. And their focus at this particular AWE was on their business applications, not their consumer applications. And it's kind of a follow-up to what my panel said, is that a lot of these guys who are making headsets are realizing that the low-hanging fruit today is in the business and enterprise market, not necessarily the broad consumer market. Now, that be said, Quest is actually, Meta and their Quest has actually had the broadest acceptance with their Quest headset in gaming and entertainment. But they also have a new feature called the pass-through. And Barton got to see a application from a company called Campfire. The guy behind Campfire is a friend of mine, a guy named Jay Wright. I've known him from the early 90s. And he's shown me this in years past. But he pointed out that in the years past, to deliver his solution, he had to create his own headset. He said that now with Quest allowing the pass-through feature, you're able to use the Quest headset for his application. And now all of a sudden he's getting a lot of interest by enterprises who can use the Campfire app. Now, Barton, tell me a little about the Campfire app.
Well, it's a very interesting app. It's used mostly for industrial design and review and enhancement. It'll take an engine, it'll take a motor, it'll take a whatever, and break it up into all the pieces that make up that particular component. And you've got your glasses on, in this case, Meta 3. And what you can do is you can then take each individual component away, look at it three-dimensional, work with engineers that have come in, figure out a better way to do it, bring it back into the model. So you've taken an engine, exploded it into all of its smaller components down to literally screws that you can see with your eyes. And then you can work on various parts of it and then put it all back together. And what Jay said is that when he had his own platform, because he didn't have glasses to do this, he could count his customers on one hand. Today, with the MetaQuest 3 pass-through capability, he has thousands of customers. And pass-through, if people are not familiar, is you can look at the blown-up industrial diagram perfectly fine in the immersive environment, but you can also look at your colleague next to you and you see him or her, and you can talk about it. So you're in an immersive environment, but you're in a pass-through real environment. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Now, this particular show has two more shows yet this year. AWE Asia is August 26th, 28th in Singapore, and AWE EU is October 29th to 30th in Vienna, Austria. And then it goes back to Long Beach early June next year. But it has turned into a really important show for the metaverse / spatial computing industry. It's become the largest one. And if you're interested in this, and by the way, in that context, they had a big emphasis on enterprise. And with that, I'm going to shift it to Barton because he was able to actually chair the entire enterprise track for AWE this year. Barton?
Thanks, Tim. So I want to share with you not just the enterprise sessions, but I first want to start with some key observations from excellent keynotes, because there's brilliant speakers that go to these events and they announce things, and it's very exciting to be in the audience and listen to them. So let me give you just 5 different keynotes, just 1 or 2 things that I pulled away, but I wanted to share with you. The first one is the Qualcomm keynote, done by one of their most senior executives. And what he said that I took away was the best way to interact with AI is through virtual reality. So the best way to work with artificial intelligence is through virtual reality. And he made a big deal about the Google XR platform is now going to embed Snapdragon spaces, which is Qualcomm's capability of creating VR. So now you're seeing the linkage between Qualcomm and Google. So this is just another Silicon Valley integration point. The next one I want to talk about, Tim somewhat alluded to, but it was the Meta keynote. And here's what I want to say. A lot of people were very excited when Zuckerberg said Meta was going to spend 16 billion and create, the metaverse and create VR glasses. And they did a lot of things and they burned through $16 billion. And a lot of people said, wait a minute, that really wasn't the right strategy and they had to revamp it. Zuckerberg kind of held his ground and he just revamped it and went to the next stage. And here's my observation. Meta is back. They're back with their Meta 3 glasses. They're back with their enterprise applications. The pass-through capability is brilliant on the headsets. They're focused on immersive learning. So they've really zeroed in on one particular use case. That's not the only one, but they're zeroed in on that. They've got a new lifestyle app accelerator that they put on the Quest Meta 3 platform. And they've just released a new operating system for virtual world that's now open to all developers. So my observation from that takeaway keynote was keep your eye on Meta. They've relaunched. The next one I want to talk about is one that we all know very well because we eat their foods every day, and that's Mondelez, which is the breakaway from Kraft a few years ago. It's all the different snacks that we eat. And anyhow, I thought this was the two takeaways from Mondelez. They said connecting, collaborating, developing, sharing, and learning are what we consider the core of XR. They also said that they've developed XR and metaverse labs in the United Kingdom, in India, and the United States to help show executives the art of the possible for XR technologies. And they've actually created for themselves an additional VR center of excellence, which is at the core of their VR efforts. The next keynote was one that Tim already alluded to. It was the president of the haptics company. But this was 3 quick takeaways. 4 million industrial robots in use today. Humanoid robots are the future. That's what he said. And NVIDIA is behind this big time. And haptics is focused on humanoid robot training. Now, for all of you that are into robots, I want you to listen to this tape again and take that one away. But very interesting of how they're using haptics. And the last one I want to comment is one that's close to home, and that's Tim's headset session. It was a brilliant session. It was on the main stage, really good speakers. This is what I took away. There were 2 big apps that everybody talked about. One was the training and one was communication. Now, I think that's 2 of the 5 biggest apps that is in the XR community right now. The other 3 being content sharing, digital twin technology, and remote assistance. And so that was a very interesting session, though, and all of these sessions are on YouTube. They're all up and running, so if any of you want to listen to any of these, you just have to click on it. The one that wasn't there, and Tim alluded to it as well, but it was there and it wasn't there, was Apple. Apple was not present at the show to the best of my knowledge, but they were all over the show because the show had been renamed Spatial Computing, which is what Tim Cook called the Apple Vision Pro glasses. And during the panels and during sessions, they were brought up as, we got to keep our eye on what Apple's doing because we're going to probably be following, not leading. So it was very interesting not having them there, but having them there. Okay, so let's turn to insightful enterprise sessions. And as Tim already alluded to, in full disclosure, I headed up Day 2 enterprise track chair. So much of this comes from those discussions. There's 2 that stood out like red flags. One was IKEA, the Swedish furniture store. And all I can say is, wow. So here's what they did. They took us through IKEA's journey of 3-dimension visualization and spatial computing. And they've been at this since 2016 when they came up with their VR app, 2017 when they came on their AR app, that as IKEA Place, 2019 when all their kitchen planning tools were moved into 3D. And now in 2023, they started showing us 3D on every single one of their product pages. And what was very interesting is how they're presenting all their products. They're doing some scientific research on how the eye looks at an object. And the eye looks at only 25% of what you're actually focused on, or what you're seeing you're actually focusing on. The other 75% your eye fills in. So what they're doing in this 3D rendering in their immersive environment is they're focusing on what that 25% that you see, and that's what they build their entire portfolio on. It was brilliant. So for example, There's something called spatial computing for the rooms. And the first part is they show the room in spatial, immersive. Then they kind of help you understand how the room could be set up. They give you different options. You can play with it. And then you can experience the room as somebody inside the room looking around from a different perspective. Or they showed products where they actually recreated the room using those products. And then they brought you or your room out to other people so they could experience it and give you comments. And then they did simulation of products. So they took a product, they simulated it in 3D, and then you could touch and smell and feel the product using some of the new technologies. So all I want to say is, in the typical Swedish, very humble approach, they are knocking the socks off of other competitors and other retailers because they're all into 3D, they're all into spatial computing. And I got to tell you, you got to get into IKEA and try some of their apps. The second one that blew me away was it's the contrast more than the actual case study, and it was Coca-Cola. Now, Coca-Cola. I'll just tell you what I learned. So 1 billion Coca-Colas ago was yesterday morning, just to put this into perspective. Okay, so every 24 hours they turn around 1 billion Cokes, and what they've done is they've just had fun. They've had fun with the brand, which is nothing more than a drink, right? But they've had fun with the brand, the Gen X and millennials, and they've created all kinds of online simulations using both AI and XR. So, for example, Coca-Cola Creations, they have limited edition Fizz and Drop and Starlight products, which were designed by their customers using the tools that Coca-Cola offered to them. They created a whole concept called Space in Culture, and the customers came in and designed the cans in the environment that Coke would be sold into. They have Byte limited edition, Y3000 limited edition, all these limited editions that bring people in that want to feel special and a part of the Coca-Cola brand. It generated 300 million social media impressions, 120,000 images created, and the hang time or average spend time on the platform was 7 minutes. That's unheard of in the retail world. They created Coca-Cola Christmas cards. They allowed you and me to create these Coca-Cola Christmas cards with AI and design it however we want. And then they made this very important distinction to the audience between what AI is and what AI is not. And they try to humanize the taste and the smell and the fizz of Coca-Cola and get it away from AI, which is just helping them market and promote it. I said it's about contrast because another session that I managed was one with Hershey, the chocolate company, and Nestle Purina, the dog and cat food and other food company. And these two companies, and this session, by the way, was in something called Navigating the Fusion of Physical and Digital Marketing. So physical and digital marketing. But unlike Coke, that was, going way, way off the cliff in terms of creativity and getting their customers involved, Purina was talking about an ability to come into a store, maybe in an immersive environment, say I have in my case, 2 dogs have a beagle. Let's just say one of them is a beagle, and he's weighs X number of pounds, and he's this age. What's the best food for him? And all of a sudden on the shelf would light up all of the foods that are most relevant for that beagle at this age with this poundage. So that was their way. And they also were able to take physical shelves in a supermarket and impose them almost in a digital twin in a digital world, which was not bad, but nowhere near Coca-Cola, which is another consumer brand. Hershey was even further behind. In fact, you almost heard a little bit of skepticism. I'm not so sure about this. They said maybe hyper-personalization might be coming, but we're not quite there yet. So, Coca-Cola, Hershey, 2 different worlds, one having great fun and involving their customers and driving loyalty and customer enthusiasm. Another one really sitting on the sidelines looking at how best can we enter this in a way that makes sense for us. So that was the Coca-Cola one. But between IKEA and Coca-Cola, you've got to watch these on the YouTube channel. They're fantastic. A couple of other small ones that I want to mention, Tim. The best enterprise session was the primer for entering enterprise VR. It had Fisher Scientific, which is a great company. It had KLM, the Dutch airline, and it had Coca-Cola, but on the service side. And I just want to leave you a couple of messages, the takeaways. The biggest challenge in implementing XR projects are change management. Pushback from executives, So the goal is to start small, get VR glasses into the hands of people that are using them, get IT involved early on, get marketing and product management identified where they can use this technology, not just in the example of the pilot that we're trying, but elsewhere. So create once and use multiple ways. And then they felt that the future of this panel was avatar training and content development. But that was the best session of the whole enterprise track. It really gave very pragmatic examples of how to get into XR successfully. A couple of other sessions. The VR applied to enterprise session by Rolls-Royce and Boeing was very interesting. The big takeaway there were the metrics. Rolls-Royce, a half an hour on VR savings per day versus doing it the traditional way. No, a half an hour on VR training saved days of time doing it in the traditional way. My apologies. And Boeing, which was using HoloLens, which is a technology from Microsoft, 2,000 hours, over 1,000 installations, delivered a 20% reduction in design and an 80% reduction in deficits. So, when people are talking about, is XR here? What are they doing? It's all here, folks. And there's just hardcore examples, one after the other, of companies succeeding. There's a new push for using AR in what's called work instruction. That's a business process flow in a manufacturing environment, and how you help the worker move from one of the process steps to the other. Blue Origin, the big space company from Bezos, was there. Lockheed Martin was there, and several on the panel. The big takeaway was that, again, XR is the great vessel for AI. It's a perfect way to interact with AI. And Tim can go into this, and we can go into this in another session, but AI on its own is great, but AI integrated with XR, it makes a whole new opportunity come true. But it's not today's point. A couple of small ones navigating, let's just see, shopping. Shopping is the future. Amazon made a great presentation, little too detailed for my liking, but they showed step-by-step instructions on how to navigate 3D in the AR revolution on Amazon. And what they said is, you will see now it's available, but it'll be really pervasive in 2020, end of this year and 2025. Every single product will be a 3D capability on Amazon. And then they're moving into what will eventually be an immersive environment. So I need not tell you how important Amazon is to shopping in the United States. And the last one I want to mention just briefly, Tim, is Walmart. They've trained more than 1 million people using VR headsets. And I have done another podcast from this series, Business Success in a Virtual World, on the Walmart story. It's a fascinating story of how they've been able to train 1 million people and how they onboard these people so much more quickly, and how they resolve Black Friday, problems that come up all the time. CEO Doug McMillan's comments about Walmart's commitment to an immersive environment that he provided at CES 2024 that Tim and I spoke at in January in Las Vegas, that was raised. Walmart is also committed to really involving themselves full-time into this immersive environment, just like Amazon and IKEA and Coca-Cola. I guess the last thing I'm going to mention, Tim, is what I saw on the floor, largely complements what you said. This pass-through capability, I'm technologically challenged how they do it, but you're literally in the immersive world, completely in the immersive world, and then you look up at your partner to the right and you see him, with his beard or without his beard. I mentioned already how far haptics have come along, the capability of Campfire's blowing up an industrial product and working on it in design and putting it back together. The one thing that Tim didn't mention was Sony's glasses, their new glasses, a headset. They've been adopted by Siemens, the large German company, which is driving the industrial metaverse. I was very fascinated. I put them on. I have never seen so clearly and depictions of immersive environments I saw in the Sony glasses. And then the last thing I want to mention is digital humans. There was a booth called, I think it's Unique. And I have to tell you, the avatars that are being created today, with the ability of eyebrows not only showing each eyelash, but moving according to how they spoke, it was a bit spooky. And we're going to have, this concept of integrating the real world with the immersive world, and the integration of that happening so people can move seamlessly between the two worlds. That's not futuristic thinking. That's not Real Player One. That's here today, And these type of avatars just are a part of it. So Tim, that would be my brief overview of AWE 2024, Long Beach, California, home of the Queen Mary ship.
Yeah, which you got to stay on, which was kind of
I stayed on
fascinating.
the ship.
One thing that was a little puzzling for me, uh, AWE moved this down to Long Beach and in the area of a big creative community of Hollywood. Maybe for the first one, they couldn't do it, but I would expect that they will take a harder look at presenting specific sessions where they bring movie producers and TV producers to share what they're doing in AR, VR, and XR, because that's an amazing area of the world where the creative community is actually going to be driving AR and VR and XR into the world of entertainment. And that's going on already.
Well, we talked about the importance of content sharing, and Hollywood is best in class for content development. So I think you're right, Tim. I think it was a little bit light on Hollywood and the whole entertainment and arts industry, but I think that's just a matter of, they moved for the first time from Santa Clara to Long Beach, and maybe they didn't get them involved as much as they could or should, but they are key drivers in this industry. So I'm sure we'll see more of them.
Yeah. And so I think the show becomes even more important as one that not only tells you about what's new, but what's also capable in content creation. Because aside from what's going on in the enterprise, I'll tell you, Apple's telling me that they're getting immense interest with the Vision Pro in sports, entertainment, as well as enterprise. And I think, we're going to see some pretty interesting things, if not yet the end of this year, but early next year from Apple in those particular areas. Because I'm really looking forward to literally watching, next generation soccer and football and baseball as if I'm in the game. I'm in on the sideline, right? As opposed to the way I watch it in a very passive way today.
There was a lot of discussion at the show about what is the killer app for XR. And we've talked about the importance of VR training. We've talked about the importance of communication. And that means, multiple people in a room around a particular topic, looking at something or feeling or something or designing something. But content sharing, sports, entertainment, we're still searching for one of those killer apps. They talked about the Apple Watch, and it was around for a while. And when all of a sudden it really focused on health apps, and people could use it to watch how long they were biking or their heartbeat or their blood pressure or, all the health apps that come off the watch. That was the killer app that drove Apple's watch. I don't know, Tim. I don't know what will be the killer app on Apple's Vision Pro, which I know will be a category leader. And I guess they're still trying to figure that out themselves.
Yeah. Let me leave with just this one point, which has been the theme of our podcast all along. The technology of XR and AR is not just the future, it's already here. All of the podcasts we've given you with all of the information and various case studies have shown companies already using it today. And it's interesting because I'll get conversations with, people that, I meet or other when I talk about XR and they go, well, what's it really good for? And then I tell them about some of the things that's already being done today, not in the future, but already being today. And they basically mesmerize. They go, wait a minute, this is really happening. That's why we created the Metaverse Resource Center. You can go to ismguide.com, and from there, it'll give you a direct link to the Metaverse Resource Center. There's over 300 case studies now, over about 300 articles on it. And I really encourage you in your process of thinking about the role of XR today and tomorrow, look at that resource center because there's so much great data there. And it gets a freebie, it's one we're doing just as a part of our sharing the podcast information with you but it's an incredible resource to show what is being done today, not just what people are thinking of in the future. There are some futuristic thinking articles in there, but these are people, Walmart, IKEA, Coke, they're already doing it. And as we've said many times, if you're not doing it now, you're going to be left behind. With that thought, I will sign off for this week, and we look forward to being with you again when we do our next podcast. Goodbye
Thanks,
for
everybody.
now.
Good night.
Thanks for listening to Business Success in a Virtual World. Barton and I have helped global companies successfully develop and implement strategies to utilize these new technologies. For more information or to contact us, please visit ismguide.com and select Metaverse Resource Center. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast on your preferred platform.